All right, what's going on out there, world? It's your main man, Tommy, on the spot. Thank you so much for joining me on the Watchalong Wrestling Podcast, episode number 5, and the first of what will be kind of an August filled with SummerSlam type themed events. Hopefully, you guys like what you see, and let us know if you do. Please feel free to join the chat. The chat is now live, and in just a couple minutes, we're going to be watching SummerSlam 2007. I hope all of you guys who did enjoy SmackDown Live and who watched it, hope you dug it, and hope you guys saw that. See, there's a couple folks already joining us, so thank you so much for that. And let's see kind of where this show takes us. Now, I will warn you guys, this show was the first show I'd ever been to live that I was like, I don't know, man. Like it was one of these shows where going into the show, I was so amped. And we're going to get into the reasons why. I'm going to talk to you guys about every single thing that I did on that weekend. Just so you guys know, thank you for all you folks who have checked us out over on Twitter at WatchWrestlePod. We had about 450 followers over there. And that in the span of, we just started this thing at the end of June. It's the end of July now, so just basically 1 month. Shout out to all you folks who are joining us over there. Shout out to all the folks who joined us last night. I've been trying to do these reaction videos to live Raws and also some, wrestling drives about some of the biggest news stories in the world of pro wrestling. So, let me know what you guys are, thinking about things and what you'd like to see me kind of cover. Remember that next week we're going to be looking at SummerSlam 2013, and make sure you guys smash that subscribe button and like it away, because that is the best way for you guys to figure out kind of everything that's going on. Make sure you get all those updates directly to your phone and to your email address so that you'll know when we're on the air. So thank you guys again, and let's get kind of into where we're at here. I'll give you guys a little bit of a background. I've got all the beverages ready. Hopefully you guys do as well. It is 10 p.m. here on the East Coast, a little after 10 p.m., so we're going to be on the air until almost 1 a.m. tonight. So if you guys are joining me, I hope that if you do have work tomorrow, you got yourself a little bit of these guys. I do have a coffee. I do have some adult gluten-free beverages down there, which I'm excited to go and check out and have throughout the show. And also some bottles of water. Make sure you guys stay hydrated as well. And we'll check in, and we're going to go and chime in and watch the show live here in a couple of minutes. But 2007, man, one of the weirdest years for WWE. They came off one of their most popular WrestleManias in WrestleMania 23, obviously the Battle of the Billionaires, Vince McMahon versus Donald Trump. Well, really, it was Umaga versus Bobby Lashley. Lashley representing Donald Trump, Umaga representing Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon shaved bald at the end of that show. And then, man, everything just kind of goes to hell for WWE. And you'll see that the theme of SummerSlam 2007 and the theme really of the summer of 2007 is that nothing quite goes right. There's issue after issue after problem, and there's just so much going on. So let's do this. Let's jump right into the show. Okay, I know that we're a little bit early, but let's do that. Let's jump into the show, and we'll go ahead and we'll do that. So if you guys are chiming in on the WWE Network, and like I said, I don't necessarily anticipate too many folks that are going to be watching along here, just watching me for this entire period of time. The entertainment is finding your way over to the WWE Network, checking out SummerSlam 2007. It's really, the network, I can't put it over enough. It's one of these things that, the idea that like a wrestling fan would not subscribe to the WWE Network for $9.99, for new subscribers, it's completely free. And folks wouldn't do that when you're getting so much content right there. You could literally watch all the different Raws leading up to the show. You could watch all the different SmackDowns leading up to the shows, and you could watch and just chime in with so many different shows, and it's really cool stuff. So let's go ahead and let's check out what we got going on the WWE Network. We already have this queued up, by the way. So just so you guys know, we've already gone through that whole TV 14 piece. So I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to go ahead and make sure you're queued up with us before we go ahead and do all that. And obviously, I screwed up on that. Okay, so we are paused right in the beginning of the show, and we are ready to hit that unpause button, and we're going to start SummerSlam 2007 live from the Prudential Center in New Jersey. And again, you know, keep in mind what's going on here for WWE. The Chris Benoit tragedy has just happened. I'm going to get into how I found out about all of that, and we could, you know, talk about as much as we want. It's not exactly a good moment. It's not something I like to necessarily talk about, but we will, you know, you can't tell the story of SummerSlam 2007 and the WWE during 2007 without mentioning the Benoit tragedy, because it really defines WWE as a company in 2007. Obviously, the whole ordeal of what happens with Benoit, that leads to the start of the wellness policy and a whole bunch more. So let's start this off here. So hopefully at this point, you've already played your TV 14, your little idea there, the little gimmick that goes through, that whole thing. Hopefully that's already set up, and you've got your show queued at 000, and we're going to count it down at 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's do it. Remember, this is the 20th SummerSlam. Bang. Off the top of my head. So as this is playing here, I'm going to let this kind of play through so you guys can get the setup of the event, and then we'll dive right in and start talking about things. So this is what you're seeing here is the entrance of Triple H and his big return, and how much more of a bigger deal they just made of this than anything else they've promoted. Alrighty. So, as you can tell, this is a big show for WWE, promoting both the returns of Rey Mysterio and Triple H. And the reason for that is because at this point, WWE was all hands on deck, man. They were trying to do every single thing they could possibly do to get as much as they possibly could out of their very thin roster here. That's only going to get thinner. And we're going to get into all that kind of as this show unravels. But show was from the Prudential Center, August the 26th, 2007. A reported, let's see here, I have these stats right up here. It is 17,441 in attendance. I'm sorry, it's not from the Prudential Center. It's from the Continental Airlines Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey. WWE was really kind of building this up, trying to look for the #1 fan, the greatest fan of the entire world. They were building this up as like a really, really big deal, and they went kind of on like a campaign tour trying to find their #1 biggest fan, and in doing so had I think a couple of different events, but certainly had the SummerSlam party 2 nights prior to the show. I'm going to get into that in a minute, just so you guys know, because I always do let you guys know. Prior to the show starting, Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch. Lance Cade, may he rest in peace, defeated Brian Kendrick and Paul London for the Tag Team Championships. So already we were off to a great start because anyone knows that I am a huge fan of Brian Kendrick and Paul London. Their team, I had the official Brian Kendrick and Paul London T-shirt. We're here, we're not all there, with the masks on the front. I actually went to a live show and voted in a little poll of who we wanted there, whether or not you would buy a shirt. They had like a little survey that people were filling out whether or not you'd buy the shirt of Paul London and of Brian Kendrick. I, of course, checked yes, and then went out and bought it the second it was released. And I had that, so I was stoked to that. That is I believe it's the shirt I wore to this show. But Lance Cade, Trevor Murdoch, they're getting a bit of a push here. I believe they were the tag team champions going into the show and had won those titles on the won the titles at the Great American Bash, or at least had them. And immediately following the Great American Bash, one of the more interesting main events in Raw history, it was a champion versus champion match, and it was John Cena, the world champion, teaming up with Candice Michelle, who was the women's champion, against Umaga, the Intercontinental Champion, Lance Cade, and Trevor Murdoch, the tag team champions. So it was a crazy period of time. Really kind of just zany stuff going on Raw. But like I said, this show here, going into the show, I was next level, just beyond stoked. And the reason for that was because of the immense amount of hype that I kind of gave myself about this show. For whatever reason, this was an incredibly hot show. People were really into this show, at least in the New York, New Jersey area. And as we watch this show, you'll realize there's not really a million reasons as to kind of why. It doesn't seem that clear as to why this show got so much hype. But on Friday night, the Friday, the August 24th, WWE went to Spotlight Live, a comedy club. Actually, it was like a karaoke club in New York City. And we went down there to try to get in to watch WWE superstars compete in a karaoke contest. And then afterwards, you'd be able to go get a meet and greet with your favorite WWE superstars and divas at the time, because they were still divas. And in doing so, as we watched Kane and Finlay in this opening contest here, Battle of the Brawlers, Jimmy Cordera's still doing his thing over there. So we went in, and they had a variety of different things set up. You could enter to be WWE's greatest fan. You could go ahead and you could do something to the extent of all these little gimmicks, all these little, you can go and I think that you could have played the video games or something. And when we got in, there were so many people there. And the event was karaoke, including MVP, Mr. Kennedy, who at the time was still in the midst of his biggest push, just kind of coming off it a bit, gearing up for his biggest push. We're going to get a lot of Mr. Kennedy as the show continues. So it's MVP, Mr. Kennedy, The Miz, who is the host of the show and competed in the karaoke contest. I believe he did the Beastie Boys. And you also had, who was it? Yeah, Maria. And then you also had Jillian Hall. And all of them did karaoke. All of them were, well, the MVP and Mr. Kennedy didn't. The ladies did some karaoke. Obviously, Jillian Hall's gimmick was that of the really bad singer at the time. Yes, I believe so. Maria was kind of a little bit of that ditzy type character that I think she played really well. And then obviously you had The Miz. And we got to meet everyone. But what was really funny about it, I'll never forget, there were so many people. They were going to be out way past how long they agreed to stay. And they were out there for they were out there for a really long period of time. And at the time, it was, I remember Mr. Kennedy was audibly yelling at the security to stop letting people in. He was against it. He didn't want to let people in. He was saying, hey, please, hold the people back. Stop, enough. We all have to get up. I think he had to do some sort of television appearances and had no interest whatsoever in meeting the fans, to the point that I remember MVP yelling over at Kennedy or yelling over, at security saying, no, let as many people in. If Kennedy's got to go, no one wants to meet him anyway. And so we got to meet MVP. We did get to meet Mr. Kennedy, but he was not in any mood to meet anyone. And I remember The Miz being so cool. And I remember just being like, this guy is awesome. Man, I hope his career lasts in WWE. And little did I know, we'd be sitting here 11 years later and he'd be gearing up for a big match at this year's SummerSlam. Back then, it was still early in his tenure. And I remember telling him, like, that I was proud of him because I had watched him on The Real World. And he said, you know, thanks so much for their support. I had said something to the extent of, you know, I would love to go down a similar career trajectory as you. And I remember his response was, you know, please, at the end of the day, you know, aim higher. And I just thought that was one of the funnier things that he had said. But at the time, you know, Real World wasn't my deal. Big Brother was my thing. I was gearing up to try out for Big Brother. I was really excited about that, and would almost make it onto the show, but it was not to be. But that was kind of where I wanted to go. So Miz was my guy. I thought he was awesome. He was the coolest person I think we'd ever met. And he remains one of those types of people. If you ever hear Miz interviewed, when they talk about, you know, fans waiting in the lobby, fans waiting outside, and if he minds about that, he always says, I'll mind when there's nobody waiting for us. And I think that's a great attitude to have. And one of the reasons, you know, Miz remains one of my favorites, if not my favorite superstar in WWE. Kane with a insecurity here. Let's give Kane a little credit. Big Red Machine. At this point, he is going through his, you know, he's got the mask off, obviously, now for a couple of years. I remember in 2007 being really against Kane, and I was a really obnoxious fan at this time. At this point, I am 20 years old, so I'm at peak level of obnoxiousness. I got beat, by the way. The Strongbow Hard Apple Cider Artisanal Blend. Go check them out. Strongbow. Got a couple different Strongbows lined up tonight as we rewatch this show that I don't have fond memories of. Okay, that's a 3 count. It was a 3 count. But I hated Kane. For whatever reason, I was so over Kane at this point. I remember going to shows and chanting, please retire at the guy, which is terrible because he's like a super cool guy. And by all accounts, just a super good guy. And if you're in Knox County, vote for him to be your next mayor, because I do still feel bad about audibly doing everything I could to chant, please retire at the Big Red Machine. Like only a douche could do, like myself, back in 2007. Finley at the time was like, he's in the process of becoming kind of Finley, the ultimate good guy who comes out and smiles. He's still, you know, my name's Finley, I love to fight. He has a little bastard, Hornswoggle. There's Hornswoggle on cue, who is super over, and Finley at the time is utilizing him as a weapon. And so Finley is the face here. There's a Hornswoggle getting out of the way. Finley throwing his stuff there at Hornswoggle and going for the big kick. But one of the big things about this show, obviously, as you saw in the open, was Triple H was coming back from another quad tear. This was the second quad tear for Triple H. He injured himself in January at the New Year's Revolution pay-per-view in the middle of a tag match, and did stay in there like the tough son of a gun he is and finish the match, but had been out of action ever since. And they were doing a storyline where Booker T was now king of the ring. He was King Booker. Was it like pinky in the air? And was the most entertaining character on the roster. Booker T was on fire in 2007. And so because of this, he was doing something where now he was King Booker, and he felt that he was going against every other king, didn't want anyone else to call themselves kings. He had a little bit of a feud going with Jerry Lawler, where he referred to him as Jerome Lawler. They had a match or two on Raw, and he was not happy with that a single bit, and was then also really upset that Triple H was referring to himself as the King of Kings. And that's basically as simple as how it led. But I remember going into those two matches, both Rey and Triple H, I just was not looking forward to the matches, mainly because of the fact that you could just choreograph it and see that from a mile away, they basically you could tell that those guys were going to win their matches, and we were hoping against hope, but it was not to be. So, tough stuff there. And most of the matches here were thrown together. I don't even really recall what there's Hornswoggle with another shillelagh right to the injured ribs of Kane. So even though Hornswoggle is, a little bastard, he's... Oh, I thought Finlay had him. Look how amped the crowd is, by the way. This is for Finlay and for Kane. Crowd is super into this and are really involved and having a hell of a time. And one of the big things I remember about this entire weekend was just how excited everybody was for Orton and Cena. And that might seem crazy when you consider, I believe this is your ball game model. Choke slam. Sign guys into it. There he is in his red hat and kind of the worker shirt there. WWE sign guy, one of the Uber fans that, really kind of made a name for himself around this period of time because he was on Deal or No Deal with John Cena, with Lashley, and a variety of other folks. So one of the things kind of going into the show, though, was Randy Orton and John Cena. Now, obviously, many people hear Randy Orton and John Cena and can't help but kind of groan a little bit. And the reason for that is because they've had a million matches in a row. They've had so many. And that being said, hang on here. Let me pull up the exact stat for you guys here of how many times these guys had fought each other. Let's take a look. We're getting them. Pulling this up here. Just bear with me here. All right. My technology is not playing along with us here, but this was the very first one-on-one match on a pay-per-view between John Cena and Randy Orton. And it was the type of deal where, oh, look, they're doing the biggest party of the summer. Here's Vince McMahon. William Regal had, by the way, just a little while before this, had been the general manager of Raw, last eliminating the Sandman when Vince McMahon returned. We'll get into Vince here in a sec here after he talks. Let's hear him. Santino Marella at his peak here, in my opinion. Just the best. All right. So everybody here, we'll get to in a sec. All right. So if you're wondering what the heck is going on with Vince McMahon here, Vince McMahon has recently returned weeks before this pay-per-view On June 12th, 2007. Hang on one second. All right. We'll get into a lot of information here. So Vince McMahon, June 12th, has the big reveal where he's walking through the whole back. The roster's all looking at him. He seems super somber. He seems like he's in a really bad mood. And it's where he passes Paul London, and Paul London has the big, like, shit-eating grin on his face. And in doing so, he had basically been in a situation where he blows up. They pronounce him dead. They never say he's dead. They just say pronounced dead. However, this actually picks up a ton of steam. People start to literally, I'll never forget listening to the radio on the next morning on WFAN here in New York. And literally in the 2020 Sports Update, they literally said that Vince McMahon had passed away last night on Raw. So people, you know, even though everyone says it's fake, people sometimes buy into things and buy into storylines. And at the time, that was where Vince McMahon was at. Everybody thought it was a bad idea. And I remember even just saying, man, imagine someone dies. And so someone did. And WWE Hall of Famer Sensational Queen Sherri did die. Despite the fact that she did, though, Vince McMahon stuck with it, and they continued the storyline against better judgment. And then Benoit dies. And when Benoit dies, they have to kind of come out and say that, you know, Vince McMahon has to have like a press conference at the arena that night, which, oh, by the way, they had the caskets and everything set up for Vince McMahon's funeral at that show. So they were getting ready for a funeral. How freaking bizarre and awkward is this? And then it's announced that Benoit's died. So they go through the Raw tribute show. Vince McMahon comes out and says, hey, you know, I'm not dead. It was part of a storyline. It's all a big ruse. And disappears off television for a while. Now he comes back a couple weeks before this show. He gives it like about a month or so of where he's off television after Benoit dies. And returns to the show. And now it's really awkward because they do the Benoit tribute show because they don't know that Benoit is the one who committed suicide, killed his family, that whole thing. So they do the tribute show to Benoit, and then basically they need to just, by the time SmackDown happens and the story breaks that he's the one who did it, they have to basically act like none of this occurred. So they have to go back in time now. All this is going on, and they basically need to say that they just act like nothing's happened. So there has to be a reason for Vince McMahon to eventually return to TV, and he does. When he does, he explains away his pronounced death as he was just, you know, he faked his own death because he wanted to see if anyone cared about him. He found out people did care. He thanked everyone for the support. They quickly moved past it. And then on that episode, they recreated the scene where Vince is in the back walking past the roster. He gets to a limo. It looks like, oh my God, are they going to actually just kill him off again? And right before he goes in there, Coach stops him exactly similarly to how he did it the first time, except this time Coach says, I just got this message, and it appears that you have a son, an illegitimate son that belongs to you. And basically for the remainder of 2007, this is the new storyline that they go. The original idea for that son was supposed to be Mr. Kennedy. Now, there's a lot of interesting things that happened here with Kennedy. So Kennedy had gotten the Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 23 and immediately said he was going to cash it in at the WrestleMania 24 main event. So he was going to hold this Money in the Bank briefcase for the entire year as we watch Kennedy, Carlito, and Umaga in a triple threat match for the Intercontinental Championship. All three of them are heels. So this match basically died a farting church-like death here. Because, like, who do you get behind? So Kennedy ends up where he looks like he's just destined for stardom. And then he gets injured, and they think they have to take the Money in the Bank away from him But turns out there wasn't an injury. But it was too late once it was discovered that it wasn't an injury. So they already took the Money in the Bank away from him, gave it back to Edge. Edge cashed in on Taker on SmackDown and won the world title back. So Kennedy's first push is out the window. Then, in the wake of the Benoit, idea and everything going on with Benoit, they end up doing a deal where they established a wellness policy and they allow all their superstars to kind of, they make all their superstars go through wellness policy, and they want to clean up the roster. Kennedy volunteers to go on every single talk show and talk about how, he's on Fox News and he's talking about how the wellness policy is legit. It's helped clean him up. It's gotten him off steroids. He couldn't be more thankful for it. And then what happens is, just a couple weeks following this show, Kennedy is named in the Signature Pharmacy scandal, which we'll get to in a little bit. We'll talk about it a little bit later on. But we'll transition a bit here because also in this match here is Umaga. So originally, the original plan for SummerSlam was actually that it was supposed to be the main event, and everything was built around Umaga going up against Jackass, to the point that if you go follow us over at Watch Wrestle, at Watch Wrestle Pod, you'll see that in our little picture, our profile picture, we have the original poster for SummerSlam 2007, which is Umaga standing on a beach with every member of Jackass buried in the sand, neck up, up to their neck with all their heads out. Umaga standing over them, and they actually started to build this up for months, to the point that commercials for SummerSlam 2007 started to really promote this big deal as Umaga versus Jackass, and you could actually go online. You could find some of the original promotional material for this, the original commercials and such. And Umaga is there with Steve-O, choking the guy like half to death, and basically came around and said that, they were all ready for it. And Steve-O's like, we've done a lot of crazy things. Nothing's crazier than going up against Umaga, though. And they had this whole big thing, and it was literally going to be Umaga going against all of them. There's rumors that they were even going to have Wee Man go against Hornswoggle, who at the time is a little bastard. I'm not sure. I think he already was Hornswoggle, but, whatever. So they had all this planned. Then the Benoit thing happens, and Johnny Knoxville gets cold feet. Because at the time, Johnny Knoxville was actually, he was in some movies, and it looked like he was going to be a bit of a kind of B-level actor and do different types of movies, everything to that extent. So Johnny Knoxville gets cold feet. The rest of the Jackass crew is ready to go, though, but with Knoxville not being a part of it, they just felt that it wouldn't have worked as well, and they nixed the entire idea. So that original SummerSlam poster with Umaga standing above the Jackass crew, that's all out the window. Everything they were planning is all completely finished, and in doing so, they end up going a different route. And according to What Culture, the different route that they were going to go with, let me go through this, was to go with Jeff Hardy. Now, Jeff Hardy at the time was in one of his major, it looked like they were really going to get behind Jeff Hardy. And at the time, the idea was Jeff Hardy was the Intercontinental Champion. He had lost the Intercontinental Championship to Umaga, so it kind of made sense that they were going to go back to this at SummerSlam, and it looked like they were going to put Jeff Hardy in the spot where the Jackass guys were going to be a part of. However, that didn't happen because the Umaga-Hardy rematch was in the cards for SummerSlam. However, Hardy was sent home by the company before the taping of Raw on July 30th for an unspecified violation of the company's wellness policy. His suspension was only 30 days, and he won the Intercontinental belt as soon as he returned, although there were major reasons for that switch. So instead of this, and instead of Jeff Hardy, one of the hotter characters at the time, going against Umaga, we get this random triple threat match between Kennedy, Umaga and Carlito. And I feel like at this point, this is kind of at the period of time where you have just a slew of mid-level guys, a slew of guys that are in that mid-card for WWE at the time that are like right on the precipice of maybe becoming something a little bigger. Your Carlito, your Umaga, your Kennedy, your Chris Masters in 2005 was like super big. You also had, who else? You had, man, a whole bunch of folks that were just like in that mid-card. You had MVP, you had Matt Hardy, you had all these guys on the precipice of maybe breaking through and becoming main eventers. And with the exception of, you know, Edge, Jeff Hardy, Rey Mysterio, guys who were there prior to that kind of ruthless aggression era in 2002, you don't have any of them post-2002 break through until CM Punk does in 2011. So if you think about that, from 2002 to 2011, nobody holds the world title who debuts during that period of time after 2002 until CM Punk does in 2011. That's basically an entire decade of the same guys on the top of the card, which actually, I guess with the exception of Khali. Yes, I guess Khali was the one guy. He was the hot up-and-comer who was given that world title match. Umaga, though, was, man, he was on his way. Umaga was on his way, and it's, even watching this match, it's so sad to see and remember that Umaga at the time was such a big deal. And, you know, he's off the heels of having one of the best world title matches. I think it still holds up as one of the best world title matches in Royal Rumble history. His last man standing with John Cena. He was just like, he's the type of guy that really came across as completely unstoppable. And here he just looked awesome and got past Kennedy, got past Carlito, and it's a shame that he never got the spot with the Jackass guys, because I think it would have been really cool to look at this show here and say, this was a show that was all about Umaga. This was a show that we can go back and remember him fondly. And instead, in that one show that was supposed to be the show all about him, it never fully came to fruition. If you're wondering, by the way, what happened to that original poster, it eventually became Triple H on the poster for SummerSlam 2007, which, I mean, I guess looking back, that was kind of the deal where they were going to basically kind of harken back to Triple H. They were going to get into him, and so it kind of made sense to promote him as one of the bigger attractions on the show. But as you'll see, things were, you know, with that match, you know, we'll kind of get to that in a little bit. So, all right, here comes Rey Mysterio here. And at the time, they were building that Rey Mysterio was returning. He had been injured by Chavo Guerrero earlier in the year, so he's coming back to face Chavo Guerrero. So logic says he's going over Chavo. Now, I will say, while my crew and I at the time were a bunch of, you know, the folks that you go to a show and you see sitting there and being a bunch of, you know, kind of 10 months. So he'd actually been injured in 2006. But even though we were the guys who were sitting there and rooting against Triple H, sitting there rooting against, you know, Batista, we didn't root against Rey, because Rey's Rey, and you gotta love Rey. And I'll be honest, I never was into Chavo Guerrero so much. Let you guys kind of hear this hype video here for Rey. It's funny that here we are now, many years later, and Rey Mysterio is again being rumored to return to WWE as a pretty big deal. You know, he's going to be competing at All In, but Rey Mysterio, by all intents and purposes, it seems like they're, according to Wrestling Observer newsletter, they're basically just in the discussions of figuring out the number of dates, and Rey should be back in WWE some 11 years later. So, you know, I don't know if it'll necessarily be at SummerSlam, but Rey is being promoted as the one of the pre-show, one of the kind of the pre-order characters for WWE 2K19, and those pre-order characters have proven to me a huge deal for WWE. In the past, they've included guys like Bill Goldberg, Kurt Angle, and those guys both ended up in the Hall of Fame. I think Rey's got a couple more years left. I think he's looked great in both of his Royal Rumble matches for WWE earlier this year, and is still, I mean, he was just announced for a huge match at All In. And so he's still got a lot going on and a lot there. So, you know, there's a lot going on there. So Chavo is parading around here as Rey Mysterio. Chavo, I feel like, this is probably, if memory serves correct, the last push here for Chavo Guerrero. He eventually goes to ECW and does actually get a ECW world title match against Kane at, I believe, WrestleMania 24, but it's a quick nothing of a match, and Chavo quickly loses that belt. Maybe even been at 23. No, it was 24. So Chavo's on his way out here. But with that being said, Chavo lasts a good while longer, even though he's not really somebody who's shown a lot on the shows. He lasted a few more years in WWE, and obviously Chavo was at the center of the Benoit controversy because Chavo says he's one of the last people who spoke to Benoit. And if you're ever going back and kind of reliving some of this terrible time in WWE, you've got to go and listen to Chavo Guerrero on Chris Jericho's podcast. It's one of the earlier episodes of Talk is Jericho. He goes through literally every single thing that he was dealing with at the time, and it's a nutty time, man. But this just right here, I mean, the guy just seems like a complete sitting duck. I mean, he did the best that he could, but because remember, they wanted to build this up as a big double return. If I was doing it differently, though, I would have had Rey return on SmackDown leading to this match. Could have continued to build up the rivalry up there. Oh, God. Sign guy with a sign for Chavo that reads, "Pathetic Hispanic," with 2 arrows pointing to a cutout of Chavo's head. So, according to this list here on What Culture, Vince McMahon was not a fan at all of Rey Mysterio's outfit. I mean, you know, I say maybe you should have had Rey return on SmackDown, but people were into it. So at the time, Rey's whole thing was that at some of the bigger shows, he would show up and he would do things specific, like he would try to model his outfits after something big in the movies or a superhero. So he has the Avatar outfit at WrestleMania. I believe it was WrestleMania 22. Actually, I think that was actually WrestleMania 25. But he did the Flash at WrestleMania 22, which was one of the more famous ones. Here, he comes out as Silver Surfer. And supposedly Vince McMahon did not get it. Vince McMahon blew a gasket backstage, was not happy about it at all. And it was really weird. I remember we were up way, by the way, in case you're wondering, one of the reasons probably we didn't love the show either, we were way up in the boondocks, my mother would call it, the nosebleeds. Way up, all the way in the left, behind the entranceway. And Rey Mysterio just painted all over. And when he came out, we were like, whoa, what's up with Rey? Because we couldn't see shit. It's anything from where we couldn't see shit. Yeah. Fuck it, it's after 10 o'clock. You got to realize your audience at this point. If you're tuning in and expecting a family program, then I'd suggest you check me out on Thursday nights over at Disney 101 Pod, where me and my buddy Steve will be talking about all things Disney, and it's a family-friendly podcast. Not so much here, though, on the Watchalong Wrestling Podcast. But Rey is decked out here. He's completely silver, and he has a completely, looks like somebody, you got to wonder who sat there and painted him all over the top of his outfit. He does look completely ridiculous. And if I remember correctly, a little bit rusty in his return here. One of the other things that we looked at, and one of the other things that we had done at the time, kind of going up into, you know, where we were at, we were going and doing basically a lot of work in terms of, you know, trying to, again, hype ourselves up for the show, trying to do what we could to do different things. And one of the main things that we were talking about in continuing the hype was earlier in the evening. This particular show, we went along and we actually went and spoke Let's see here. Oh, gotcha. So, hang on 1 second here. Let's just try to do a little bit of research here on the show. Oh, I will say, I mean, they're really going back here with the kind of that lucha style. Yeah, this is already better than I remember. I think the problem was Chavo Guerrero, for whatever reason, just never connected with me. You know, just could never really fully get into it. One of the big things here, by the way, you'll notice that JBL is one of the commentators for SmackDown. He and Michael Cole at the time were going through their first incarnation of kind of where they're at, even though this was way before, you know, this was during a period of time where there's a variety of different even though this was during a period of time where a lot of people were really, you know, JBL's retired. He doesn't think he's ever going to return. He eventually does return a while later. It seemed like he returned way late for him. A couple of years later, he seemed to be coming back in there and returning to the ring. But at this point is when he's in his first role as a commentator. He's been famous for the Ballgame Model, and him and Cole are doing their thing. He would return a little bit later along with Chris Jericho. Pretty much right after Jericho returned, JBL would return to the ring as well. So, in any event, we were talking about different ways that we were hyping ourselves up for the show. Right before this show, so they were really trying to build this as like the party of the summer, because WWE was like, they were trying to do whatever they could to kind of repair their image at the time. You know, they can't be to blame for the Benoit stuff, but the Benoit stuff was literally everywhere at this point. Every newspaper was covering it. I remember at the time I was working with individuals with developmental disabilities, and if anyone's worked in that field, you know that the R word is, you know, eliminate the R word. No one really uses the R word anymore, retarded. And I'm just, you know, dropping it in context, but well, by the way, you can tell this paint idea is so bad. It's all over the place. It's everywhere, and you can see part of it on Chavo. Almost all of it is already gone off Rey's back, and it's not working well at all there. But earlier that day, yeah. So, but in working with people with disabilities, I remember like on the newspaper in huge letters, it said something like Benoit kills son because he is retarded. And man, have to work there, and you know, a lot of our individuals with disabilities were huge wrestling fans at the time. I'm going to talk to them, especially because like at the time these individuals didn't know that Vince McMahon wasn't really dead. Like I remember literally consoling individuals and explaining to them that, you know, even though Vince died, it was part of the storyline and it wasn't real. And then Benoit dies for real, and I'm going back to work, and these individuals are now saying, no big deal. I know Benoit didn't really die because, you know, just like Vince McMahon, it's fake, and it was just part of the storyline. It's like, no, this one's real. And then to see that all over the newspapers, and I mean, every time you turn on ESPN, Benoit was on there, and it was all about him, and it's a creepy time, and it was really, really tough. And yeah, tough period of time to kind of go back and relive some of this here. But on a much brighter note, earlier that day, in looking back at SummerSlam, we were outside. We were trying to, you know, get ourselves amped for the show, and because they were saying it was the biggest party of the summer, they were trying to really, you know, they were trying to really promote that this was, they had like a little, like, I don't even know how to explain it. They had like, you basically were going out, you were there with, it was like a big like autograph signing. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the signing was Crime Time, I was a Crime Time mark on top of marks. I was in love with Crime Time. I thought Crime Time was great. I think Crime Time never really got their just due in there, and I thought that there was so much more Crime Time could have done. Unfortunately, their run ends up coming to an end and then gets restarted, but I feel like they never really fully got from that initial, like, wow, it's Crime Time, people are into them, and, you know, people are excited about what they're doing. So I thought that was cool, and I thought that also, who else was there? It was Crime Time, it was Chris Masters, and it was Ric Flair, right? How could I forget Ric Flair? And Ric Flair was there, and he could not have cared less. He was signing autographs, handing them over, signing autographs, handing them over. He was literally having a conversation. So he'd basically be chatting it up with somebody here. Here I come to get the autograph, and he'd hand it to me. You'd go by, he wouldn't give you anything. He was so involved in his conversation, and that was how Ric Flair was basically every time I met Ric Flair, if I'm being completely honest. But I guess because he's the nature boy, Ray selling the knee injury there. So far, so good, though, on this match. And actually on this show. There's nothing on the show that's been particularly bad on the show. But at the time, it was being built. Ray's return was kind of the big thing they were building up on SmackDown, whereas like they were building Triple H's return over on Raw. So they were still the main. Sorry about that. That was some sort of thread, and I felt like someone was crawling on it. So, yeah, we have bugs here in the Watchalong Wrestling studio. Thank God it was not, though. It's just a thread on, I guess, my shorts there. There's so the three different announce teams at the time were. Oh, that looked rough. They had you had JBL and Cole. You had obviously King and JR for Raw, and then you had Michael Cole. I mean, Joey Styles and Taz during Taz's final year with the company. And one of the things that was I always thought was really interesting about it was that Taz had been moved from SmackDown, and I was always curious as to why that was. I mean, it made sense to have him do ECW though, but. Obviously, you've got to give Ray credit. Not only is he doing the full Silver Surfer outfit with the silver pants, the silver mask, but he's also got the silver contacts in his eyes. Pretty badass there, as Ray usually is. The problem with Rey Mysterio and why he was always getting injured at the time and really throughout his entire career here is because Rey's knees were always kind of banged up. And this really that's one of the reasons he was out of action was because of his knee here. And you notice that Rey's knees continue to give him problems throughout his entire career. And the reason is because as you see him flying all over the place, he's landing on his knee right here. He's landing on his knee on the outside of the ring. I mean, that stuff just over time kind of goes through and is an issue. Oh, Mysterio. It's amazing, like, how much Mysterio does. And at the time, I'm still very heavily into doing my own basement wrestling federation. So I remember forever we were trying so hard to get that to be one of our guys' finishers. And to think that that's just somebody, Ray's, like, signature move there. The, you know, going from the shoulder position, flipping over into the, kind of, rotating over and catching him for the DDT. Really, really cool stuff. There's only one red. Look at that. I mean, geez, first match back and flying and landing right there. I remember us now, even though we were against, because we just thought, we just wanted something unpredictable. And we thought maybe Chavo had him there. Didn't happen. Clearly that young man that just got the camera on is into the idea that Rey lost the match. And, that Rey won the match, rather. And there you go. By the way, for those of you guys who are tuning in to hear about my breakdown of the Ring of Honor show, that is going to happen right after this match. Ring of Honor Mayhem, Manhattan Mayhem 2. We're going to talk about that right after this match because just kind of, and by the way, one of the cool things about WWE Network, if you've never seen it, on some of the older shows here, you can kind of get yourself amped up to certain things. Something I want to definitely promote for those folks who are watching the Watchalong Wrestling podcast on delay, can't tune in live, you're watching this, and you want to just kind of hear my thoughts about each match. Maybe you just want this match. Drop it a dime, boom! That's your match. Good match. That kid is amped. Look at him in all of his right gear. Sheesh. So, very cool. Not a bad match. So, at the time, you now have 100 other things going on. Excuse me. Wow, look at how over Rey is. Beauty of live television. You get, live sneezes, always cool. Live television, live streams, rather. But Rey Mysterio, man, doing his thing. So, yeah, not only on Friday night did we go to that party over at the Spotlight Live karaoke thing. Not only right before the show did we go to a meet and greet with a couple of different WWE wrestlers that I believe was for charity, if I'm not mistaken. I think you paid a certain amount of money all to charity, and it was just them standing there and doing their thing. But the night before, I broke one of the cardinal rules that I actually established the cardinal rule right beforehand, which is it is never a great idea. And I love indie wrestling. Like I said, next week, I'm stoked. I got Progress Wrestling on Tuesday. We're going to get into that 1 week from today. That's where I'll be. I'm pumped for it. And but going to an indie show right before a WWE show may burn you out quite a bit. You have to know what you're going to expect with different shows. If you look up and down the card on this show, other than this match right here, and later on Punk versus Morrison, you're really not getting great match. Those are probably your two on paper good matches. So you have Rey, you had Rey versus Chavo, and you also had Punk versus Morrison. And the rest of the match is Rey going out of his way to make sure he slaps every little kid's hand there. Very cute. The Welcome Back Rey, the W with the WWE logo, very cool. So they're really full hype mode, full promotion for Rey being back, and it's good to see. Let's see. Good old Todd Grisham, now of ESPN name. We're going to listen to King Booker because I love him. Oh, there you go. Oh, I see. All right. Let's see here. Alrighty. I'm trying to get this chat function. Somebody had messaged me on Twitter. Let me know the chat is not currently working. So let me see here if that kind of works out. I'm going to jump into. Let's see. Listen to King Booker here. Oh, look at this. Yes, there is someone over in the chat here. I'm seeing it here from a viewer's perspective. It looks like Bill is over there watching old King Booker doing his thing. What's going on out there to Bill? And we're getting ready for the Divas Battle Royal. I'm going to go ahead and see that. I do see that here. I do not see it, the group chat, even though I do see it here. I do not see it on the actual live feed. I have to go and see it kind of on the turnaround there. So very cool, though. It is working, but it's strange that I'm not seeing it over here. So there you go. Alrighty. So as we're getting into the Divas Battle Royal here, no offense to the Divas, but the Divas were not at all like they were today. There was no women's battle. There was no women's pay-per-view. There was no. There was really nothing that you could expect from the women like you do today with the WWE Evolution pay-per-view. That's going to be awesome. That's going to be a lot of fun, and that's great to see where women's wrestling has come. Back then, though, man, women's wrestling was nothing compared to what it is today in WWE. The ladies were just not really prominently featured, and so this match here is one of these things that is one of the, this was your get up and go use the restroom. This is the match that was the come down match. Rey Mysterio just returns. They want to get you ready for some more stuff down the line. The Triple H return. They don't want the crowd to be burned out for that. So it's a come down match, and that's always where the Divas were, where the women were at the time, was your typical calm the crowd down match. And at this point, we definitely were thinking about Ring of Honor, Manhattan Mayhem 2, which was the night before at the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City over at the Manhattan Center. And one of the best nights of wrestling I had ever seen. Let me go through this card. The card that I'm about to go through is an absolute who's who of wrestling personalities. If you think about some of the folks that are currently in WWE or in and around the current wrestling landscape. So let's start off here. So in looking back, the Resilience made up of Matt Cross and Eric Stevens. Eric Stevens, if I'm not mistaken, Eric Stevens got over because he was doing like a choo-choo type gimmick where he'd, before running into the corner, he'd go choo-choo and run directly and kind of do his own thing. It was crazy. And but Matt Cross, obviously of Tough Enough 2011 fame. Matt Cross, one of the first people that was eliminated off Tough Enough because he thought at the time that he was somebody who was, Stone Cold felt that he kind of showed, thought he was better than everyone else, and he kind of showed that, and unfortunately he didn't last very long. So that's tough. And but Matt Cross always one of my favorite acts at the time, and I was a fan of Matt Cross. So they defeated the team of Mike Quackenbush and Jigsaw. Jigsaw for a long time, and it might still be, and I believe he is, the booker for all things Ring of Honor right now, whereas Mike Quackenbush would go on to establish Chikara Wrestling and have a lot of success there. Next match, Jimmy Jacobs. Jimmy Jacobs, who recently was a writer for WWE and just last year had been fired by WWE for going outside during the Bullet Club invasion of Raw and posing with the old Too Sweet with the Young Bucks and with Cody and all those guys. So that was the end of Jimmy Jacobs in WWE. But one of the guys who kind of helped create that Chris Jericho, You Just Made the List stuff, he was one of the writers behind some of that stuff that really just one of the best minds for the business. And here he was in a match against Mitch Franklin, defeating him. Adam Pearce, one of the top agents for WWE right now. You'll always find him backstage in some of the backstage segments, separating up the fights and stuff. He was just on Raw last night, teaming with Brent Albright, who would go on to have a little bit of a run in WWE. And BJ Whitmer, they defeated the team of Delirious. I apologize. Delirious is the booker and the writer for Ring of Honor now, not Jigsaw. My bad on that. Nigel McGuinness, who is now obviously a commentator for NXT, and Pelly Primo. In the next match, Davey Richards, who at the time seemed like he was going to be the next big thing in wrestling, and had a bit of a run with TNA, but never fully kind of worked out there. He also had a team with Eddie Edwards, and I remember those guys getting a little bit of a look in NXT prior to it becoming kind of the NXT as to where it was now. But Davey Richards at this time is like on his way to becoming a huge deal in Ring of Honor. He defeated a guy by the name of Pac if you're not too sure and familiar who Pac was now known as Neville, the departed Neville, who hasn't been seen in WWE TV for about the last year. Next up was Austin Aries defeating Jack Evans. Austin Aries at the time was, Austin Aries right now, the king of all titles. He's the Impact Wrestling champion and just came off of a run last year with WWE. So very, very cool. And not to mention, he'd go on to defeat Jack Evans and Roderick Strong, who's now currently in the Undisputed Era. So this is just like a who's who. This Ring of Honor, you go down the roster back in Ring of Honor 2007, 2008, 2009, you have about half the roster is currently in WWE or in NXT. It's crazy. Jack Evans, by the way, was led to the ring by Julius Smokes. And I loved Julius Smokes and Jack Evans, man. Jack Evans, unbelievable. So underrated in the ring, and I believe he was trained, if not mistaken, by F4W Online's own Brian Alvarez, which is kind of cool. Next up was Ruckus, another member who I believe was with the Vulture Squad. He defeated Eddie Edwards, who would go on to team with Davey Richards, still a big part right now of Impact Wrestling. Next up, you had a big match between Claudio Castagnoli going up against Chris Hero. Claudio Castagnoli, the big win. Who is Claudio Castagnoli, you ask? He is now Cesaro. Who's Chris Hero? He is now Cassius Ohno. And Chris Hero was with Sweet and Sour Incorporated. Larry Sweeney, may he rest in peace, was his manager, along with Sarah Del Rey, who's went on to train many of the women down in NXT and is one of the top trainers in the Performance Center. And I believe her and Cesaro are in a relationship to this day. So that's pretty cool. Then you had Takeshi Morishima against Bryan Danielson. If I could tell you one match to watch on this show, on SummerSlam, on that entire weekend, hell, I can't, forget about everything else you're going to watch. Go out of your way to watch this match between Bryan Danielson and Takeshi Morishima. It was incredible. Just absolutely balls to the wall, amazing. It would go on to win the match of the year from the Wrestling Observer that year, and it was about as brutal as you could possibly get. Bryan Danielson, of course, is now Daniel Bryan. This is the match where Daniel Bryan kind of popped his eye came out of the eye socket, and he'd eventually need surgery, but he continued the match, popped it back in, and continued the match. Daniel Bryan, tough as tough can be, and Morishima was such a badass, just looked like such a badass. And Morishima is what got me into Ring of Honor Wrestling. I remember I went to a show. My friends were talking about going to a show. I went and I saw Samoa Joe, who at the time was doing the stuff and came out with the Ring of Honor title, defended that against Morishima, lost the title to Morishima, and then I was just like, these guys are freaking awesome, and became a huge, huge fan of Ring of Honor. And from 2007 till like 2010-ish, I'd say, maybe even 2012. I think it might have even been until 2011 or 12. I was at every freaking Ring of Honor show that was in New York or the tri-state area, and still try to get there to this day. Ring of Honor, couldn't be happier for their success, and they're an absolutely great company. But damn, that Morishima Bryan Danielson match was one of my favorite matches that I've ever seen live. Is one of my favorite matches I've ever seen live. It stands up from shirts till today. Go out of your way to check it out. Sorry to be talking about that while the women are doing their thing. No disrespect to them. But yeah. All right. And then in the main event, I remember this, the Briscoe brothers going up against the team of Kevin Steen and El Generico. Who are Kevin Steen and El Generico? Well, El Generico is a retired wrestler who went and, got his own little property over in Mexico, a little orphanage that he started up. But Kevin Steen is, of course, Kevin Owens, and El Generico might be Sami Zayn. So if you go check those guys out there, you can see them kind of really early in their run. Steen Owens kind of really came into his own at a Ring of Honor show I was at when he won a one-night-only tournament in Long Island in a blizzard. And it was the complete and utter coming out party for all things Kevin Owens and all things El Generico. But at that point, they had kind of started out. El Generico did his kind of like a comedy-type character. But now they were like a serious team going for a tag title match against the Briscoes, who at the time were doing the man up, and they were over like Rover, and that was good stuff. But I remember when people, if I'm not mistaken, during that match, everyone was chanting 2 straight, 2 straight, 2 straight, wanting Briscoes to win in 2 straight falls. But at the time, I did not want, at the time I was more for Steen and Generico because, again, 20 years old, I'm rooting against everyone because I'm cool. So I was rooting for everyone. And at the time, it was Steen Generico. I think they won the first fall, and I remember everyone was chanting 2 straight. Steen Generico win the first fall. It was for the tag titles, and I remember my buddies and I immediately started jumping up and down doing the 2 straight for Steen Generico. But the Briscoes did win that match, and that was awesome too. And think about that, because the match of the year in the middle of that show between Morishima and Daniel Bryan, at the time though, they still held up. They still did their thing, the tag title match. So really good stuff. Here's MVP here. At the time now, I started to love MVP because I just met him. He was awesome. He let us. He's the reason why we were all able to go and still meet everybody on Friday night. And he's my guy here. At the time, though, the reason why this skit is going on is because MVP had been diagnosed with a real serious the wellness policy was just catching people right and left with a variety of issues with them related to folks doing things they shouldn't have been doing. But one of the real kind of bright spots of this was they were able to catch a rare heart condition weeks before SummerSlam of MVP, who was the United States champion. So let's see here. Yes, it was a couple weeks before the show, MVP, and again, I'm going off whatculture.com, a little article posted boy. Let me see. It doesn't say the author's name, so I'd love to give him credit. It doesn't seem to say the author's name, but MVP's tied up with Matt Hardy in a major feud for the U.S. title. MVP at the time was diagnosed with Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, an abnormality that causes an accelerated heartbeat and palpitations. Though not usually fatal, the condition can increase the risk for a heart attack. So, basically this is going on, and he had it corrected, according to him, through an outpatient procedure. But they had to kind of put everything on hold, even though this was one of the hottest feuds that was going on at the time between MVP and Matt Hardy. I mean, they were really getting over. And eventually they decided to start doing like a Strange Bedfellows type tag team. But now they're looking for ways to keep things going. And would keep things going here for a while, all the way up to, for a long time. And they'd start to do different things to keep things going. I was at a show, a house show that they did, I believe it was Raw, ECW, and then a Saturday Night's Main Event taping, where Matt Hardy actually boxed Evander Holyfield because MVP couldn't compete. One of the things that's kind of cool about looking at MVP, though, the day before this show, when we met MVP originally, there was a couple of people that were going there. There were fans that were getting autographs for MVP, and MVP actually got her card because he needed to get his hair done before SummerSlam, and I bet she is responsible for that haircut, that MVP got going there. So they're doing a beer drinking contest. We'll listen and see how it goes. Matt Hardy's my guy, by the way. This Matt Hardy, my favorite wrestler from about 2002 until he left WWE and kind of went off the chains a little bit for a while. He was my guy. Matt Hardy very over with the crowd. You see, I'm sure you think you can outdrink me. I know I can. I know I can outdrink you. But you know what, MVP, tonight, I'm not Yes, see, that was the one I was at against Evander Holyfield. Crowd knows what's coming up here. Crowd's going absolutely ape. Imagine it wasn't Austin here. I completely forgot Austin's on there. This is pretty cool. I don't know why I hated this show so much. I mean, this gets a bad rap. This is a decent show so far. Man, they're building it. Think about the fact that they're still going to have Triple H come out later, and they're about to have Stone Cold Steve Austin. Boy, I do not have any recollection of him being on this show. But lo and behold, there he is. Oh, Stone Cold Steve Austin. That Hardy is literally marking out in the ring as he's coming down here. This is awesome. This is I vaguely remember this. I don't know, you know, this show is getting a bad rep from me. I think, you know what? Hey, this might be a reaction to the idea that you don't hype a show up too much. I had gone to so many different things. The hype for SummerSlam was real. We got tickets that day because SummerSlam was sold out for a while. And then last-minute seats were put on sale. So we had terrible seats all the way in the back. And there's Matt Hardy and Austin doing a big cheer. And let's hear what Stone Cold has to say. Does he say anything? Or you see Affliction-style T-shirts in style here. Austin's got one on. The acid wash. Love it. Doing push-ups, getting ready for the beer contest. Jumping jacks. Crowd is, man, like, think about the fact that Triple H is making his big long-awaited return in like 2 matches, and they're just killing the crowd with all these returns here. Crazy to think they gave Austin the return. Matt Hardy, by the way, seems like he's gotten out of the way entirely. I don't know where he is. Saying about Matt Hardy, I guess, right? You have Stone Cold. You kind of don't need Matt Hardy doing this thing as much, huh? Oh, big stunner. Everyone goes home, and everybody's happy. Biggity boom. Realest guys in the room, I guess. And Austin lays out. MVP. We'll go a little lower on this here. But that's cool, man. That's a very, very cool. You know, something I completely forgot that Austin was even on the show. And I'm very surprised he was on the show because of the fact that, again, you're building up Rey Mysterio, you're building up Triple H, and Austin shows up as well. And, you know, I built this show up as being such a crappy show, but so far so good, right? Little cheers to Stone Cold. We probably wouldn't be, I don't know, to get into the cider gimmick too much, but. Oh! MVP sold that stunner like a son of a gun. It's a little crazy that Matt Hardy had kind of gotten out of the way. I remember being, you know, at the time, and being a wise-ass wrestling fan and not appreciating the moment I was seeing live here. Matt Hardy being upset Matt Hardy wasn't getting more of a... I actually remember being a whiny bastard fan upset that Matt Hardy wasn't getting any sort of rub here. Now that this is all coming back to me. But boom, Stone Cold Steve Austin, big return here at SummerSlam 2007. And but it is a little crazy. You think about it, like they're utilizing Austin's return here to build up the feud and the continued feud between MVP and Matt Hardy. But at the same time, they're not really doing much with Austin there. I mean, they're not doing anything to help out Matt Hardy once Austin comes out. So this is now going to be promoting that WrestleMania 24 is coming to Orlando, which is the original. When I went to Orlando this past year, it was at the same venue. I mean, last year, WrestleMania 33, it was at the same venue. The Citrus Bowl. Now it's not Citrus Bowl. Now it's Huntington something or other. Hunting Ground Stadium. But one of the main things that was going on at the time, by the way, you'll notice, they've kind of just one last point on the Matt Hardy MVP feud. Think about that. That feud was, it's my boys Crime Time. Let's take a pause for the cause and listen to Crime Time because I loved them back here. Especially when you hear how much heat Shad had, you could tell, like, it looks like, man, he might have heat in this actual segment. Yeah. I'd have money. Yeah. Crime Time was our guys, man. At the time, we loved Crime Time. And unfortunately, in the middle of this run where it's Teddy Long's getting in on it. And now Coach is getting in on it. And they got Regal with the hat on, tilted hat. Regal is getting in on the segment. This is entertaining as all hell. Ron Simmons showing up here too. Wait for it. There you go. Very well done. These backstage segments were at a peak back here, and so, all right. One last point on Matt Hardy and MVP, though, to think that feud was over the U.S. title, which was a complete and utter mid-card feud at the time. But that being said, at the time, they, were kind of building that up. But with the fact that they had all these different things going on in the summer of 2007, they would then transition into the two of them being the Strange Bedfellows kind of tag team champions. They would go all the way until April 27th, 2008, when Matt eventually, and even there and beyond, but Matt eventually got the U.S. title from MVP. And there's always that famous moment where MVP's in the Money in the Bank ladder match at WrestleMania 24, and Matt Hardy attacks him out of the crowd, kind of reigniting their feud. But one of the most underrated feuds, a great feud between Matt Hardy and MVP. I'd say it's probably MVP's best feud of all time. Certainly from the perspective of being in WWE, and that was really good stuff. So good to see them do that. It would be, could you imagine like any of these matches that are happening at SummerSlam, any of them going on, I guess with the exception of Lesnar and Reigns, because that does seem like the feud that may or may not ever end, but going on all the way till WrestleMania, and here they are with Hardy and MVP, and doing the best they could with a bad situation like MVP's condition, to doing their gimmick and to getting the most out of it. All right. So here comes John Morrison. And wondering who John Morrison is, it's Johnny Mundo. He is the ECW champion. And at this point, I'm going to get into kind of where I was at when Benoit passed. So, for those who don't know the situation with Benoit, Benoit was supposed to face CM Punk at Vengeance Night of Champions for the ECW Championship, which was the pay-per-view 2 prior to this one. I think they had Great American Bash and they had the pay-per-view in June. And they did an ECW tournament to see who would be the new ECW champion. And it came down to CM Punk and Chris Benoit. And I believe the storyline was that Benoit was supposed to win the ECW title and then kind of act as a mentor to some of the up-and-coming guys in ECW and be kind of that focal point of that ECW brand. Obviously, Benoit does not show up at the show. It's one of the weirder things ever where they just said Benoit couldn't make it to the show. And the whole crowd is chanting for Benoit, but they needed a replacement for him. So it was, look at Punk here, by the way. Look how young and full of piss and vinegar he looks. 7 years later, he'd be one of the most bitter men with into the world of pro wrestling. But in doing so, they had no choice. They had to figure out something to do. They put Johnny Nitro, who was Morrison, in the position, who at the time Nitro was a member of Eminem with, maybe just out of that feud, that team rather, with Joey Mercury. And while he was talented, it was bizarre. It was like, what is he doing here? You know, Punk Benoit was like a match. It was a dream match. You had one of the best wrestlers in all of WWE, and you know, one of the most accomplished wrestlers who had been there from WCW, who had been there, you know, had an established career, would do so and would be someone who you'd want to go against, kind of a, you know, somebody's favorite, many people's favorite wrestler in CM Punk. And unfortunately, it never happened. And you know, because obviously everything that was going on. So I remember watching the pay-per-view. At the time, I was really big into everything going on. In terms of WWE, I was all about it. I was really excited about it. And unfortunately, it never fully kind of took place. You know, we would watch all the pay-per-views, and that was the match we were most excited for on Vengeance Night of Champions was Punk versus Benoit. We were not sure what happened. At the time, I was working at the Little X Stop and Shop. Yes, I had 2 jobs. I was still working with people with disabilities, but I was, you know, supplementing my income over at the Little X Stop and Shop as a cashier. And shout out to all the cashiers working hard out there doing their thing. Can't hate on them, as it seems like I've lost a little bit of the feed. All right, we're back. So I was working at Stop and Shop. I remember one of my things was you know, still in school at the time too here. I'm finishing up my bachelor's degree in my senior year. And I remember after this, you know, that whole thing goes down with Benoit, and I came home, take a little nap before I went to work, and my buddy at the time calls me, and he says, hey, do you know why Benoit lost? You know why Benoit didn't show up to the pay-per-view? And I said, no. What happened? Do you have any update on that? And he said, he's dead. And I remember being like totally blown away and shocked and really sad and really disappointed. You know, everything about it was devastating. And I remember that night, Raw was going on, and my father called up, and he was like, hey, is Raw doing a tribute to Chris Benoit? And I said, yeah, they are. And he's like, that's kind of crazy because, you know, why else would Benoit and his family be dead? All found dead in the same place. And I said, I'm not sure what you're getting at, Dad. I mean, clearly someone broke in and killed everyone. He's like, well, maybe, but there's also a distinct possibility that he's the one who did it. And it's crazy for WWE to kind of jump the gun here and do a whole tribute show, because what happens now if this comes out that he does it? He's the one who did it. And I remember during that tribute show, William Regal really being the one to kind of, he was the one who kind of seemed like maybe things weren't so good. And he did a little tribute to Benoit and said some words, but then he did seem really uncomfortable with everything going on. So really eerie stuff, and a tough spot for Nitro to be put in, because now he was kind of the face of ECW and had to transition from Johnny Nitro, who was like at the time with Melina and doing that whole thing with Eminem, had even kind of been the guy that was being positioned as Kevin Federline's friend in the beginning of 2007. If you remember New Year's 2007, I believe it was, Kevin Federline, K-Fed, was going against John Cena on that episode of Raw and ended up winning with some help from Johnny Nitro. But now he's transitioned into this John Morrison type character with the big fur coat and the glasses and everything else. So it's crazy to kind of see where we're at with that. So yeah, this was the, but because of the fact that my friends and I, specifically at the time, I had a couple of buddies, and myself, believe it or not, despite the fact that here I am sitting with you guys knocking down a couple of strongbows during the show, I was straight edge, as was my friend. So Punk was our guy, man. We thought he was the coolest thing since sliced bread. We were both into punk rock at the time. My friend was in a band. You throw your little black X's in the back of your hands, and Punk was our guy. And what ended up happening was Punk would end up losing, so Punk's in this match, we're excited, but it took a while for Morrison to kind of find his footing in this role as the shaman of sexy and everything else going on. It was hard. He did the best that he could, but you couldn't help but just think of Benoit. Every time you'd watch anything to do with this, you just couldn't help but think, like, this is uncomfortable. Whew. Styles is great at commentary. You're going back here and you're watching this match here. These guys are doing their thing. Styles is like on the freaking money in every single thing. He's so freaking good and so underrated, Joey Styles, who would go on to eventually do some stuff for WWE.com and kind of step away from the commentary booth. But so underrated. And him and Taz, man, they're a great, great team. Taz, to his credit, I feel like was great with everyone he was with. He was great with Cole, and he was also great with Joey Styles. I'm not a huge fan of Impact Wrestling now. I did the stuff about Slammiversary, and I hope Impact Wrestling continues to do well. At the time, I was not a huge fan of TNA, what it was called, but from what I'd watched, Taz is always great. I mean, he did well with Mike Tenay as well. Punk does seem to be trying a little too much here with the innovation. So if you're keeping score at home here, there was 4 title matches on this show in total. Let me pull it up here. So you had the Umaga defending his title in a triple threat match for the Intercontinental Championship. Battle Royal determined, that wasn't the women's champion, that was the #1 contender, with the Beth Phoenix one that we ignored entirely and talked about Ring of Honor. And this is the second title match, single match for the ECW Championship. Morrison defending against Punk. This is a really tough spot for Punk and Morrison as well. Even though Punk was over and people really liked CM Punk, he was still on ECW, which was a show that a lot of people were kind of giving up on because it was called ECW. I feel like if it was called something else and, you kind of just brought people back from the ECW brand or brought some people back, I feel like people wouldn't have been so quick to judge that show, because I do think that show was good in establishing some people. I mean, if you think about it, Punk came from that show. Matt Hardy got a big run on top on that show. You had Sheamus from that show. The Miz got his start on that show. Morrison got his start as a single on that show. There's a lot of people who really got their start on the show, and brutal ending. See, Morrison was just, I like Morrison, and I was happy to see him get a run here, but Morrison was the type of guy that Also, not to mention, like, he had the old school ECW belt, so, like, at the time they were still making it like it was ECW, and neither of these guys are in ECW. They called it something else, and, you know, it was there to promote, you know, guys like, you know, Punk and Shannon Moore and Rene Dupree like it was. Like, people would have been more accepting of what it was, as opposed to that couple-week hype that you brought in the initial ECW fans, and then everyone left when they stopped seeing all their originals, you know, becoming a big part of the show. Morrison there with the win. Foot on the rope, couldn't even get his feet on the ropes. Cringeworthy would probably be an upgrade over for whatever else you'd be able to call that. So, but Morrison keeps the belt. So our second champion has retained the title, and that being there's Great Khali. God, does he look just freaking scary. Batista's going up against him here, and every time I watch anything from Batista from 2005 through 2010, which was pretty much his entire run in WWE, I realized that I did not appreciate Batista nearly as much as I should have. I think, though, you know, I read his book, and that made me a bit of a fan of him, and I read it years after he was there. All right, so here comes King Booker. It's time for King Booker against Triple H. By the way, I'm realizing, because I see the banner up there, 1 million fan. The 1 millionth WWE fan in the building for the, whatchamacallit, the Continental Airlines Arena is what they were trying to do the contest for, not the greatest fan. So, sign guy, I don't know if it was because he was distracting with his signs, but he's been moved. But his sign here being promoted, it looks like Booker's crown is flaming there. Actually, it looks really cool. But he had a clown with a crown sign. Oof. So yeah, so remember, he was battling with Lawler. So it's always awkward. Like, this dude just lays out Lawler, and now here he is, you know, trying to garner sympathy. But you got to give credit to, so basically both Chavo and King Booker were more so into, they were the ones who were left in charge of this. And you can tell how hard that is when you go back and you look at something like what was going on with Bray Wyatt going into WrestleMania 31, where he had to be the one to carry the feud between him and The Undertaker, and he was the one who was really behind him there. Booker carried the entire feud for Triple H. It wasn't on TV. I mean, yes, they showed, like, the rebuilding the machine package that you saw earlier. Those videos were running all the time with Triple H. And on SmackDown, Chavo was doing the best he could to promote his feud with Rey without Rey there. So, tough spot. This would unfortunately be the final pay-per-view of King Booker. And the reason why, it's probably as good a time as any once Triple H comes back, because let's see here. We're gonna good old Jerome Lawler. People were into Triple H. Say this. Say what you will. But you could tell the anticipation in the crowd over the idea that Triple H is coming back. Queen Charmel, by the way, is freaking a smokehouse. Gotta give it up for Queen Charmel. I can't even front. Wouldn't say that in front of Booker, though. Kick my ass, something fierce. Take my Brawny Man t-shirt and get rid of me, and here we go. Wow. This is intense. If you're not watching this here, they are showing all the footage of Triple H getting surgery, going under the knife, and showing how they're rebuilding the game, so to speak. showing him training in the ring and trying to come back and doing all these different training vignettes that they'd show sprinkled throughout. I believe that's the same guy that Triple H trains with now. You know what? They made this work. Crowd is quite the pop, considering they've already seen Austin come back, they've already seen Rey come back. They're into this. And he's getting every bell and whistle you can get for his entrance. And of course, those "Are You Ready" gives people the idea of DX, who, you know, was just back from, you know, their reincarnation with Shawn and Triple H. Shawn Michaels, not a part of the show, by the way. He was on one of his hiatuses. Remember, towards the end of Shawn Michaels' run, he wasn't on every single show. He was in and out. He'd be back for WrestleMania, obviously, to be the one to retire Ric Flair. Hunter's super into this here. And he's amped and jacked up, and people are happy to see him. And this was a crazy time for WWE, because now would be as good a time as any to talk about what was to follow. The end of August, which was immediately okay. So basically, let's see. I'm going to go through everything that was going on here at the time. So as we said, the wellness policy is now in full effect. They have to get the crowd into what's going on. And unfortunately, days after the show, literally less than 4 days after SummerSlam 2007 happens, news came out that WWE was suspending 10 of its wrestlers. So remember, we've already spoken about the fact that WWE has MVP going through his thing. He can't wrestle. Jeff Hardy's already been suspended for 30 days due to an unidentified violation of the wellness policy. And now there was a prescription firm called Signature Pharmacy that was released by, I believe, Sports Illustrated at the time. And there were 10 wrestlers that were listed as clients that were on the list after the wellness policy took effect. 11 names showed up on this list. However, only 10 of these wrestlers were suspended. The wrestlers were Edge. Now, Edge was already out of action because of the fact that he was legitimately injured. He was going through, unfortunately, one of his many injuries. Charlie Haas, John Morrison, your current ECW champion, Umaga, your current Intercontinental champion, William Regal, who was your Raw general manager, and oh, by the way, William Regal would end up having another suspension the following year from the wellness policy when he was going through his biggest run as that hardcore heel that was like trying to go over as general manager and do all these different things. Chavo Guerrero, who was in that first match with Rey Mysterio, a big match on this show. King Bukia, Funaki, Chris Masters, and Mr. Kennedy. Now, if you remember, this is during the period of time where Chris Masters eventually does come back. He's incredibly thin, and Triple H kind of makes a wisecrack at him about like how to lose weight in however many days, and they kind of make fun of the fact that he was suspended. I think that was during this period of time. So it says Morrison and Umaga dropped their Intercontinental and ECW titles after each retaining them at SummerSlam. So you've seen them retain it. Now they have to drop both belts at the forthcoming TV tapings, and they were taken off television there. However, Booker, when he was suspended for 60 days. I guess he had not sure why he was suspended for 60 days and not 30, because the first violation is usually 30. He was suspended for 60 days, though, and he immediately gave his notice when he was informed that he'd be suspended. So here you have Booker T, and one of this, you know, he's the hottest he's ever been in WWE. This is like his biggest run. They bring back Triple H here. He's done everything he could to get this match over. A big selling point of this pay-per-view is the return of Triple H, and Booker T does everything he can, and then he gets suspended right after this. So Booker T was suspended for 60 days at the end of August, which he immediately protested. Upon hearing the news of his suspension, Booker and his wife Sharmell both gave notice to the company. The couple was officially released in mid-October, and both arrived in TNA and on their pay-per-view the following month. Booker would not be seen until Royal Rumble 2011, and he's basically been with the company ever since. But there was that period of time, remember when Booker T was in the faction, the main event, Main Event Mafia, was it? With Kurt Angle and with Kevin Nash and with Scott Steiner, everything else. So crazy, and that really does suck, because I remember it being a really big deal of what was going on with Booker T at the time. And then that was it. But what's always interesting to kind of look back at this was there was 11 names that were on that list. However, the one name who was not suspended was Randy Orton. Not only did he not get suspended, but he ended up winning the championship in October from John Cena. Wasn't really John Cena, by the way. He just won the championship when Cena got injured. But this is, again, the What Culture article here about 2007 that I'm reading off of, and he has to check that article out. It says, the curious tidbit resurfaced in late May of 2012 when Orton was suspended for a second time for violating WWE's wellness policy. Now, the wellness policy, for those of you who don't know, when you violate the wellness policy, first-time offenders are popped for 30 days. They're suspended for 30 days. Second-time users are suspended for 60 days. And then if you get a third suspension, you're done for life, and that's the end of you. So no one has seemingly gotten a third strike yet, but Orton would have gotten one and then been terminated from the company. But I do think they've added some amendment to that where you could eventually get back in if you've showed like a year's worth of good behavior, something to that extent. Who knows? But pretty crazy. Pretty darn crazy. So this was tough. I remember at the time, too, my friends and I were, you want to talk about being, that guy. We were hardcore rooting for Booker T. Let's go, Booker! Trying so hard to get the crowd to chant for that. And it just did not happen. It was, crowd was not into it. And so not only now, so remember, we've just gone through this here. So if you're following the bouncing ball at home, they've had to spend a lot of, dies. Hate to say it like that, but passes away. They have no choice but to streamline John Morrison into this spot. Morrison loses. He gets popped, so he's now suspended for 30 days. They have no choice but to take the belt off him. Thank God they had a guy like CM Punk that they can give the spot to, who is not going to get popped for wellness because he's straight edge. But just like one bad thing after another. The Intercontinental title, for example, you have Jeff Hardy who's the Intercontinental champ. Umaga wins the belt from him. They want to do a rematch at SummerSlam. Can't do it because Jeff Hardy gets popped and he's out for 30 days. He's not even on the list. He gets popped for something incredibly, differently. Umaga is now your guy who's Intercontinental champ. He gets popped. He has to lose the Intercontinental title. So it's just like one thing after another here of people they were losing. Not to mention that at the time, Bobby Lashley, who was like a guy that was really being built up. Lashley was actually going through kind of a similar spot where he's at now, except back then he was going against the top guy in John Cena. And they were the main event of the Great American Bash, and it really felt like, hey, maybe they're going with a new guy to kind of take down Cena, because Cena's going through like his year-long reign here. So This is the beginning of Cena kind of being, over it. People starting to kind of get a little sick and tired of Cena because he's been on top for a long period of time. So you now have Lashley, who looks like he's now on his way up there, and he gets injured at the Great American Bash. He has to take time off as well, so they've just lost Lashley, another guy they were trying to establish. And he, while recovering, was terminated and out of his contract, along with girlfriend or wife Crystal at the time. So crazy, crazy time to be a fan of WWE in 2007. It was just nothing worked for the company. And even when you consider, and we'll talk about it a little more later, about John Cena here. And John Cena's not on the wellness policy, by the way, so that's not what I meant. We'll talk about it in a little bit. But I remember we were chanting for Booker here. We were hardcore behind Booker. We did not want Hunter to come and destroy all this momentum that Booker's built up as King Booker. It felt so much like he was just a lame duck sitting there and he was going to lose to Triple H. So we started a let's go Booker, Booker T. We were doing all this stuff. And there was a guy who was sitting in front of us who shook his head in disgust and, quote, we've always quoted for many a year, shook his head and said, let's go Booker. There's always an asshole. So he was not happy about us doing that at all. And, you can see why. You bring your, I think he was with a kid too, which was one of the funnier parts, but you bring your kid to SummerSlam. The big thing of the show is trying to see Triple H do his thing, and to no avail. Ooh. And yes, this is when I remember he hits the bookend. We're up 1, 2, and that was 3. But they didn't count it as 3. We were upset at Marty Elias. What happened to Marty Elias? But to no avail, and this would be the end of Booker in WWE. So just think about how many people that they've established on television, how many people they've really pushed as, pushed acts as hot commodities in the company. They've given so much behind, and they've had no choice now to get rid of so many of them. It's really the spiraling out of control of all things from the Benoit tragedy that kind of really took over for WWE. And that's the end of that. That's all she wrote. It's the end of Booker T's full-time in-ring career in WWE. But thank God it ended up being that case. Because imagine Booker did go over here, and 43 days later, he's off television. He can't make it up. Okay, now this is over the top. This is, granted, happy to have Triple H back with the announcers with the standing ovation. I do recall, too, one of the big things was they felt like the standing ovation was kind of forced. And, great to have Triple H back and all, but come on. It's ridiculous. There we are. Oh, you could actually almost saw the fan. Almost saw the fan in the back there. Trying to center this out a little bit. This is over the top, though. So over the top. But at the end of the day, you have to realize what else did WWE have at the time? Every other guy is going to be off the show soon enough. You can tell how much every one of the superstars loved Sign Guy, by the way. They liked the fact that he was always kind of like making signs for the show that were all not really too wise guy signs. I mean, whatever he wrote about the, Hispanic before, that was totally ridiculous for Chavo Guerrero, but wasn't something that like you really had to get kind of behind or upset about. Like his signs were always kayfabe friendly. So if someone was a babyface, they'd be something where he'd be cheering for the babyface, and there'd be signs, going against the heels. But Triple H is he's doing his thing, man. Getting the whole show here is it's really all about him. I'm surprised they didn't just go with him to close the show. Not a bad match, though, and I will say not a bad card so far at all. I've grown a new appreciation for SummerSlam 2007. It took 11 years. But I remember it was one of the reasons we were so stoked for the show was it was one of the shows where we were building up, but did not think we were going to be able to go to the show. And then at the last minute, tickets went on sale, and 5 of us went down to the show. And while we had, I think it was like 3 of us were diehard wrestling fans. One of us is actually my co-host to the Disney 101 podcast, which you guys can check out on Thursdays at 7:30, 8 o'clock-ish. That being my main man, Steve. He was really struggling at this point. So he's in and out of liking wrestling at the time. He was really over John Cena. John Cena was kind of killing his entire run. And then there was another friend who she kind of tagged along to all the different wrestling shows with us just to have something to do and wasn't really that big a fan. So, know your company when you're going to a wrestling show. If you're a diehard fan of wrestling and you love going to the live show and there's someone you're bringing that's really fucking dragging it down, you don't want that. I think that part of it killed it. And also having terrible seats. We had awful seats for this show. We were all the way on the tippy top in the boondocks behind the entranceway and couldn't see people coming down the entrance. It was a disaster. So it was what it was. And because of that, we felt the show was terrible. But as I've been watching this show so far, this is pretty damn enjoyable, if I do say so myself. So Khali now, he shows up for WWE and an absolute beast. The problem with him, and for those who don't know, Khali also was like an actor prior to being in WWE. He was in The Longest Yard. Then he had some other roles in different movies. I believe Get Shorty, I think that was when he was in WWE. But he was a big star in the movies. So at least he was recognizable from the movies. And in India was a major, major star, massive, huge star. Problem with Khali, despite the fact that he's freaking awesome, in this vignette of him winning the title and dancing with all the ladies. Problem was that he couldn't really wrestle. And his matches were not very good, and it wasn't really hidden too well that he couldn't wrestle. Everyone kind of knew Great Khali couldn't really hang, couldn't really wrestle, and it was very obvious when it came to matches that this guy wasn't that great. And it was something that eventually became more and more glaringly obvious as time went on. Yeah, so this was pretty much Khali's offense here. As I apologize, I'm watching this preview video. Khali's entire offense was the vice grip. It was chop, vice grip, depending a lot on the person to sell. And at the time, too, I just thought Batista was, pretty overrated. I was not a Batista fan. At the time, I recognize now that, I probably should have been more of a Batista fan. I think that he was criminally he was pretty cool, and he had good matches, solid matches. You know, even this year he had his coming out party with Undertaker. But Khali, by the way, had this music at the time. So he's not babyface for Khali yet. He doesn't have the awesome and a good Khali, get the Khali, and a good. I'm glad I freaking love that freaking song, and he came out dancing, waving to the crowd, super excited. But yeah, he's at his big push right now, and it was based on need here. They had given the title. Undertaker had the belt. Edge won the belt from Undertaker. Edge got injured, and had no other choice, so they just went with the great Khali. A little upset that Edge isn't on this show, simply because if he was, we'd be able to hear Tony Chimmel do the Rated R Superstar, and that freaking love that ref. What is his name? Oh man, that was my favorite ref back in the day. I believe that the manager here, I believe it's Dave Kapoor, is the manager. Ranjan Singh. He is the manager of Great Khali. He's actually a writer for WWE. Many years. He still might very well be. I do love that this is still back in the day of the setups for SummerSlam. I specifically love it because of the I don't remember the setup because I don't recall even seeing it because of where we were seated. But it's pretty cool with the teepees and the surfboards, and they're trying to build this up. This is the biggest party of the summer. Might have been the first year they promoted it as the biggest party of the summer. And I don't know if this was just something that no, it wasn't. So years later, at this very venue, they actually would keep that 1 million fans banner up on the top of the rafters, like you would see if you went to like Madison Square Garden. You'd see all the retired Knicks jerseys. Here, one of the big things they were promoting at the Continental Airlines Arena, which eventually I believe did become the Prudential Center, before eventually, unfortunately, no longer being in business. But that was where they held most of their events during the last WrestleMania that they held in New York, New Jersey, rather. WrestleMania 29. Most of the events, the Access events, Raw, and also the night after, all took place at the Prudential Center, the Continental Airlines Arena. And I remember seeing the big banners up, you know, for them being that you can see the banner up there, that 1 million WWE fans. Not only that, but even when before the building ended and it was torn down, I think it was torn down in 2013 or 14, we were at one of the last shows there at the venue, which was Slipknot Live. Love me some Slipknot. And when we were at that show, we looked around, we saw the 1 million fans, and even saw something promoting WWE Access that they left there. So they were really proud of their relationship with WWE. If you go back and watch SummerSlam, I believe it was '97, the mayor of New Jersey was kind of building it up as it being the first WWE pay-per-view in New Jersey, it being a really big deal that it was, or at least the first SummerSlam in New Jersey. And they were always really, really into the idea of that. I always thought Great Khali's lower back always looked kind of awkward. I don't know why, but it always felt like it's a little awkward. Shout out to everybody. I've seen some viewers in there who have been in and out. Shout out to anybody who's checked this out. And if you have checked this out for this entire show, God bless you. I do realize that it is a commitment, and 3 hours is not something that I take lightly. And I do, you know, I try to provide as many, you know, stories to kind of make some of these matches interesting. One thing that is fun is next week we're going to be doing SummerSlam 2013. I cannot wait to go through this show. I was there live. It's one of my favorite shows, really, of all time. And we're going to be doing SummerSlam 2013. Trying to get my wife to come on here with me because That was her first ever WWE pay-per-view that we saw together, that we went to live, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of do that moving forward. Hopefully maybe she'll be able to make at least a brief appearance. Also see what's going on with this chat, because the chat is up here. I do see this. However, I do not see where they're at with it. So, who knows? Weird. So yeah, Khali is, I mean, he's rough. He's rough to watch in a match. I was always very entertained. I was very interested in the fact that, like, his lower back just looks freaking gigantic. And I always was, you know, I remember when we had really good seats for like an episode of ECW he was on, and he always just looked like freaking, you know, I'm 6'4", and to see somebody who's legit a foot taller than me when I'm usually towering over people, it was bizarre and crazy and crazy to see. But yes, next week, SummerSlam 2013. Cannot wait to go through that show, to watch that show. I have so many stories about it. The debut of Bray Wyatt in the Ring of Fire against Kane. Daniel Bryan versus John Cena. The Best versus the Beast. Got Brock Lesnar against CM Punk. You've got a appearance from Christian going against Alberto Del Rio in the One More Match campaign he was doing for the title. And just a lot of fun, man. Just a really, really good show. And can't wait to go back and watch that show. And it's a fun time for WWE. I think right in the middle of 2013 until the day after WrestleMania 30 in 2014 is when things really picked up for WWE as a fan. Right in the middle of the yes movement. The yes movement is just on the precipice of becoming a major, major thing going into SummerSlam 2013. And, you know, this is also the time when Total Divas just comes out. The story breaks about Darren Young coming out of the closet. So there's a lot of different stories that we're going to get into. I was there live. It was one of the last live access events they had for SummerSlam 2. Still don't know why they don't do access for SummerSlam anymore. Well, I do know. It's because they only do the VIP portion of it, and it's super, about $150 a pop. So that's disappointing. But we did go to access, and we were down in California, and it was a great, great trip. Can't wait to go over some of that with you guys next week. This match, though, I mean, oh my snoozeness. I mean, you basically got Khali in the ring doing a major rest hold. And it's nonstop rest holds. I mean, the guy is as slow as molasses. The guy is plotting. Hate to go after the guy because I do think he holds a good place, but not good. Not good at all. To the point that, thank heavens, when we first started the old podcast, I put a cup of coffee here, which, by the way, I had made it till after midnight, after 2 hours. I've enjoyed the show so much for the first 2 hours until Khali came out there. And I didn't need the cup of coffee until now. Oof. You know, Batista, to his credit, tried. And I remember people saying that Khali was so bad in the ring, and Cena also was so bad in the ring. I remember Cena, yeah, right, Batista. You're not hitting him with Batista bomb. I remember Cena actually getting a pretty decent match out of Khali. Batista's going up to the top. I mean, he's trying everything he can to get a lot out of Khali here. The Khali bomb literally was Khali putting his hands on the guy's shoulders. The other guy putting his hands around Khali's neck. And basically the guy getting the move jumped all the way up and went straight down, and Khali barely moves. Like, pretty immobile. Yeah, this entire match is lame. And on this What Culture article that I've harkened back to a couple of different times, and I do apologize if this information, clearly I think some of this information comes from other places, but Nothing is unfortunately referenced here. So, that's the end. He hits him with the chair. That's the end of the match. What a waste. And Khali keeps the belt. So 3 championship matches, 3 champions retain. And I think that was some of the stuff that was frustrating about SummerSlam 2007. Lame. And, I mean, they were also in the come-down spot. Remember, the crowd is super amped from everything going on with Triple H's return. People are ready for Cena and Orton. I would not be shocked if this is the first time I ever viewed the match and we just ran straight to the restroom and went to the merch stands during the match. Because, like I said, big thing for me has always been, if you go to a show, Spear, but Carlito looks like he just takes a spill. You know, give Batista, give him credit for trying. I've always heard that Khali's a great guy, by the way, and I hate to hate on the guy, but he was an attraction more than he was anything else. Cool little beat down here, but you know, Batista's really just beating the piss out of Khali here. It's funny, I didn't realize how much I had an appreciation for the referees at the time. But as I'm watching these reps, I'm like, I didn't even realize that many of them are no longer working there. But I really did enjoy those reps. Yeah, somebody has a sign WWE, we want Edge. There's a rumor, too, on in this What Culture article that I keep harkening back to, that Undertaker was supposed to also be coming back on this show, but was called off. And it makes sense. I mean, you've already gotten Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, and Rey Mysterio. Undertaker would have been lost in the shuffle. But then they did an all right job in kind of spacing things out. And looking back, I think, honestly, you know, you could have put Triple H and Booker on after this match because this match is just terrible. But you put this match on because it's the come-down match. You know that it's not going to be great. They kept it relatively short. It was 5 minutes, though it felt like 50. And, you know, they had the match do their thing, and now we get Cena and Orton. Let's go with Vince McMahon and Coach. Mae Young and Moolah cameo. Wow. These skits have been really good foil for all the matches going on. Wow, I didn't even... Always good for a laugh there. By the way, this might very well have been the final appearance of Moolah, because this is August 26, 2007, and Moolah passed away on November the 2nd, 2007. So just about, May has really given the tonsil hockey to Vince there. But Moolah had really, you know, she kind of did her thing, and this is one of the final appearances of Fabulous Moolah. Vince is kicking around and they're rolling around. And, you know, with William Regal, it's sad because, you know, here he's doing a good job being that comedy, the comedic type of general manager. He would eventually become a serious heel general manager in 2008. It looked like maybe he was even going to get a major push as a top heel, maybe even like a title type run, and unfortunately got suspended again, and never really got another shot after that in terms of like a serious run. Vince with some great facial expressions. So Vince is, you know, Coach, it was old chicken makes good soup. That's pretty gross. Vince really is excited about his makeout sesh with the fabulous Moolah. With Mae Young, but yeah, wow, that's crazy. That might have very well been Moolah's last appearance on WWE television, as they had, you know, just a little bit wild there. So yeah, so at this point, John Cena, Randy Orton. Randy Orton is about as hot of a heel as you can possibly get, to the point that at the Ring of Honor show, there are people chanting for Randy Orton. I'm telling you right now, if you go down to Joey Janela's Lost in New York City show, there ain't going to be too many people cheering for anyone on the WWE show. Surely not going to find anybody cheering, I don't think, for Roman Reigns. But Randy Orton, people were really into. And this felt like, man, you've just had 3 title matches. 3 champions have held on to it. Cena's almost held the belt for a complete year here. This is really feeling like this is the time for Randy Orton to win the belt. I remember we got into the arena early that day. We did the autograph signing early. And then on the way out of that autograph signing, people were already lining up for it. Randy Orton signs all over the place. People cheering Randy Orton. And people were really into this. And people were excited about it. And even though Randy Orton was, you know, again, we talked about the fact that Randy Orton and John Cena all told from this point until 2014 had something like 22 matches with each other. Here we go. So yeah, I'm pulling up the article here. This was the first one-on-one pay-per-view match. It looks like I've lost my feed. That would be a bummer to go all this way. We'll be fine. I have alternative ways to pull it up, but would hate for that to happen. There you go. So they were building up Orton as like that serious, like super kind of crazy, you know, villain, and people were getting behind it, which was really kind of cool to see. I'm going to go and send out a little tweet to the folks out there, and we'll kind of see how it goes. One second there. Alrighty. Oh, the old school Randy Orton theme music. I loved it. And there you go. All right. So we're gearing up here. The main event. Thank you guys so much for checking out what we've been doing the entire night. It's been great hanging with you guys. A reminder that we are going to be jumping aboard and doing the whole deal here. And next week, it's going to be SummerSlam 2013. When I finish up with you guys here, because I am a crazy person, I will be going ahead and letting the folks know on Twitter where we were at in case anyone wanted to join us. But Orton, man, he was completely over. He was having a hell of a time, and people were really getting behind him. This was like the rebirth of Randy Orton. He obviously was pushed into a, role maybe he wasn't really ready for. World title match, SummerSlam 2004, and had done his thing. He gets his title run. And then even though he was kind of in and out of the main event picture, felt like he had really established himself as a hot heel 3 years later here in the main event. It's SummerSlam 2007. And, they'd start a very long rivalry here between he and Cena. Now, I do want to say that even though this is their first one-on-one pay-per-view, meaning they had a couple of matches, kind of multi-man matches, in which they were involved in, and I believe the Night of Champions Vengeance pay-per-view, I think, had a 5-way main event, and there may have been another one in there as well. But this is the first one-on-one meeting between John Cena and Randy Orton for the world title. Here comes John. This is also, by the way, Cena is his usual boisterous, over-the-top, ridiculous self. This is before he did start, my fate. Oh, no, it's not. Okay, so Cena does go. Usually comes out, he acknowledges the cameraman next to him, and then eventually runs in there. This was before he was doing the Cena colored shirts. He's doing the Cena hustle, loyalty, respect, kind of dog cage type deal. And it's insane. So yeah, because I'm crazy, after this I will catch up on SmackDown Live, and then I'll join you guys tomorrow morning. If you guys are subscribed over to the YouTube channel, come check me out tomorrow morning. I will not be back on here at 3 in the morning. I'll be finishing that up, either later tonight or tomorrow morning. And then on the way to work tomorrow, join me for the Wrestling Drive as I'll give all my thoughts on SmackDown and continue the train rolling here on this YouTube page. Mike Chioda, give the guy credit, man. He's had such a long run. He's still your main referee for a number of these matches, and is doing so here as well. Finish with my beer. You call cider beer? I'm not sure what we do with that. Cena takes off the dog tags, and away we go. You can hear the crowd. So my friend being a major Cena hater, this is one of the main matches that kind of goes between the two of them here. I do recall this being a pretty good match, but this is like the entire show here was all about this match. And listen to the crowd here, just how amped they are. I will say they've had a number of matches on pay-per-view between the two of them through the years, but this one here, this first encounter, really does feel like it was a big deal, a bigger deal than I remember it. Little did we know what we'd be in store for over the next 7 years. These guys would basically have every type of match you could ever think. If I'm not mistaken, I think the last encounter was, wasn't it Royal Rumble 2014? If And the crowd just completely shit all over the match and wanted Daniel Bryan and nothing but Daniel Bryan the whole show. I'll tell you right now, though, the build for SummerSlam 2013 is something that I'm looking forward to going back and watching because it's a lot of fun stuff there. It had to just be such an interesting time. I would have loved to hear Bruce Pritchard and Conrad do this one. This is obviously, I think it's one of Bruce's last ones, the last one being 2008. And this was not on one of their polls for SummerSlam coming up. But I would love to hear their thoughts on this show because this had to just be the most fascinating time ever to be around and to be backstage with everything going on. Yeah, so there's Sun Guy. He's back now in his seat. I don't know. Earlier they showed him he was nowhere near his seat, so I don't know what that was about. I thought he was moved, but I stand corrected. He's clearly not moved. He's right there. For those of you guys who are unaware of our schedule for the remainder of, for the month of August, rather, next week on the Watchalong Wrestling Podcast, we are going to be watching SummerSlam 2013, which I mentioned a couple times tonight. I'm a little excited. The following week, right before SummerSlam 2018, we're going to be coming back, and on that go home week, we're going to go back to where it all started in terms of SummerSlam in Brooklyn. We're going to go back to 2015. We're not going to watch SummerSlam, though. Instead, we're going to watch NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, the original one, 2015. A really fun show. I can't wait for that. I'm supposed to have a guest that's going to join me on that show. Hopefully he does, because it's going to be fun, and I'm stoked for it. Then something we're going to be doing is kind of a little bit of a breakfast review, so to speak. That weekend, Saturday and Sunday, going into NXT TakeOver and Brooklyn and SummerSlam, we're going to be live on the YouTube page. We're going to be breaking down every single thing, getting you prepared for both those big shows on Saturday and Sunday. It'll be at around 11 a.m., 12 noon. We haven't figured that out yet, but that is something we're going to do. We're going to be previewing every match and giving our thoughts on all of those matches. A reminder that during SummerSlam weekend, this is the spot to be, folks. I'm going to be pretty much all over that weekend there. I'm going to be at SummerSlam. I'm going to be at NXT TakeOver. I'm going to be at DZ and Friends, the Dolph Ziggler comedy show on Friday night. I work in Brooklyn, so I'm going to be right down there filming stuff right outside the venue pretty much before anyone else gets any footage of what that venue looks like. The mural video is one of my videos that gets a lot of love each year. So make sure you tune in for that and just keep it locked in, man. It's going to be a fun time as we get to SummerSlam. The week after SummerSlam, we don't know exactly what we're going to be doing on the podcast just yet. I'm leaving that open in case they go a couple of different ways with it. But that will be announced after SummerSlam. On Monday morning, I will announce what we'll be doing on the final, on the week after that on the Watchalong Wrestling Podcast. And then the final weekend of August. Let me get you that date right now. The final weekend of August, this is actually August 1st, as of 30 minutes ago, but the final week of August, August the 29th, 4 weeks away, we're going to be going back in time, continuing our Back in Time series, looking at 20 years ago. 20 years ago. And we're going to be watching SummerSlam 1998. The Highway to Hell comes to its culmination. I'm pumped for it. I've been enjoying going back doing this 20 years thing, and it's going to be fun, man. It's going to be a lot of fun to go back and see that. But this show's been a lot better than I could remember. I'll tell you that. Being there live, I hated the show. I remember being like, this show has been terrible, but the skits with Vince McMahon I thought have been good. I thought the skits with the MVP stuff with MVP Matt Hardy and Stone Cold's coming out of nowhere, thought that was really good. I thought that the matches themselves, there really hasn't been anything terrible on the show. I thought that the matches were way better than I really thought. I thought it was, pretty good stuff. Can't complain. Cannot complain about the quality of show here in 2007. Let's see here. Orton hitting him with that hardcore chin lock here that Randy Orton, unfortunately, over time, specifically in 2007, now I feel like he's freaking awesome. But back then, even though he was great in the ring, even though he was getting over, he would lock in that chin lock and away we'd go. So believe it or not, they were building up the first Raw coming out of the Great American Bash as who was going to be the guy to challenge for Cena's opponent at SummerSlam. And they kind of built this up pretty well in terms of throughout the show. Jonathan Coachman was teasing that he was going to watch every show. He was like acting general manager. And they were building up that, who was going to be challenging Cena for that title. And one of the things I thought that was really interesting was the people they were building up. They were building up that maybe it was going to be Carlito. Maybe it was going to be Jeff Hardy. Maybe it was going to be Umaga. Maybe it was going to be Randy Orton. And then eventually it was revealed as Randy Orton. But and it's pretty cool because obviously both these guys came in 5 years earlier together. They held them off. Their first match, one-on-one pay-per-view match, they held them off for 5 years, kept them away from each other. And them both being from that historic 2002 class, which also had the likes of Shelton Benjamin, Brock Lesnar, and Batista. So great, great class of 2002. Let's see here what else we got. Man, the crowd is, give them credit, the crowd is in an absolute frenzy. This match is not doing it for me just yet. I mean, Cena's, Orton's real slow there. I mean, he's working to the crowd and give him credit for that. Crowd just seems, it almost feels like maybe they had done something with the audio here because the crowd just seems like it's just screaming almost. But I do know people were into this. People really thought this was the end of Cena's run. Because it was almost like, I believe this was going to be the first year-long title reign of Cena built around what was going to happen between Cena and built around the fact that he was going to be the first person to ever take over and become part of a to have that year-long title reign since Randy Savage had done it back in '88, and here was Orton kind of going against it. They didn't mention it on television, but it was definitely something that I remember insiders and smart fans like myself were following. And what was really interesting was coming out of the Benoit stuff, one of the things that, came out of that was Chris Jericho started to do a lot of work for WWE. Not really for WWE, but he was one of the people that Nancy Grace spoke to. Nancy Grace was coming at WWE hard after the Benoit stuff. And Jericho started to really come back and, he spoke on behalf of WWE going against Nancy Grace and, talked about how, Benoit was going to be a champ and he wasn't depressed by his son's role in WWE and had nothing to do with it. Kind of came to WWE's defense. And at the time had not been in WWE for like 2 years. And what ended up happening was from that, his talks with WWE really intensified over time. And it seemed like suddenly now Jericho was coming back. And what this eventually led to was the Save Us Y2J vignettes. And it was such a freaking great idea that Jericho was going to be the guy to come in and go after Cena, who at the time would have been on a reign that had lasted, over a year. He had won the title, I believe, in June of 2006. and now was going to be keeping the belt all the way to, actually no, because it was September 2006. Right, against Edge, TLC, in Edge's hometown. Won the belt back from Edge, had the belt all the way through until now, with the idea being that Jericho is going to be the guy to come in and save us from this reign of John Cena. Of course, in October, Cena ends up tearing his pectoral, and so right before No Mercy, which was going to be, I believe it was going to be the show that Jericho came back on, they end up having to kind of redo everything. They had like some random couple of match series where it was like Umaga and Triple H and Orton ends up coming out of that with the world title. So when Jericho does show back up, the Save Us vignettes transfer, and it goes from his whole ordeal coming back to save us from Cena, except this time he's saving us from Orton. And it was lame. And I mean, it wasn't lame. It was cool to have Jericho back. It was great to have Jericho back. But it was lame from, like, why would he need to save us from Orton, who just won the belt? But if he had came back and had that shot to go against Cena and save us from the reign that Cena had been on, I think it would have just been so freaking awesome. It's a shame it didn't happen, but injuries are the name of the game. And, of course, Cena would go on to get injured in October of 2007, had the pectoral injury, and was going to be out for anywhere from 9 months to a year. And of course, would somehow return at Royal Rumble 2008, which I was there for. And the biggest pop and greatest live moment I've ever been to, at least one of them, was John Cena returning at the Rumble 2008 after just being out for 3 months. Pace definitely did quicken. I got to give JR credit for that call. I remember the finish of this being something that I absolutely hated. We're going to get to it in a sec. I mean, I'll give you guys the 11-year spoiler here that clearly you guys know Cena ends up holding on to the belt here. Which, by the way, they cut out some stuff here because there was definitely something where they showed the 1 millionth fan and had her name show up, and they cut it out. It's not on the show. It's weird why they do that. So yeah, follow me along on @Watchalong. At WatchWrestlePod. Follow me at Tommy on the Spot. There'll be an announcement at some point, hopefully tomorrow, depending how much later I can stay up, catch up on SmackDown, and give you guys my thoughts on that show tomorrow. By the way, typically we do these shows on Wednesday. Next week is a crazy, crazy week for me. As I mentioned, I will be at Progress Wrestling in New York City next Tuesday night. Going to be enjoying that show. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then next Wednesday night is my brother-in-law's 18th birthday. So a lot of crazy stuff going on next Wednesday night as well. So the Watch Along Wrestling podcast will be 9:30 p.m. next Thursday night. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited for it. And a lot going on next Thursday night. It's going to be insane for me because I'm going to do double podcasts back-to-back. I'll be on the Disney 101 pod. And then I will be on the Watch Along Wrestling podcast at 9:30 p.m. on Thursday evening. So make sure you get plenty of updates. You follow me on Twitter at WatchWrestlePod. And also on Twitter at Tommy on the Spot. So I'd love to talk with you guys. Follow me on, if you follow us, Watch Along Wrestling Podcast, definitely follow you guys back. We're trying to grow that community on there. The response has been overwhelmingly great. And, I do realize there's some folks that are on there have given some excellent feedback and chime in. And the idea here is, hopefully if you've got some time, you're watching as much of the show as you possibly can with me. But if you're watching it on delay, hopefully you're going, you're watching the show, and having us somewhere with you as you enjoy the show. And personally, I think that Divas Battle Royal is a little more fun with some commentary about the Ring of Honor show that happened the night before, way back on August 25th, 2007. I had mentioned earlier that I was at the Saturday Night's Main Event at Madison Square Garden, which actually the taping for took place, I believe, after a Raw. So it was like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning insanity. And actually, I remember Austin returning for that. So while it was great Austin was here, it had almost been like Austin was returning so frequently that it was almost the law of diminishing returns. At some point, the return doesn't mean as much if the guy's coming back every week. So I remember us being like, it's Austin again, and not really fully appreciating how great it was to see him. Watching it 11 years later, completely forgetting that he's involved in this Matt Hardy MVP segment. It was awesome stuff, man. And that was to me, that and the skits in the back with Vince McMahon probably were my highlights. I thought the match of the night was probably Rey and Chavo. I thought they did pretty good, though. This match isn't half bad, other than, now that it's picked up, it was definitely slow in parts. Kind of just a point on Sign Guy. Sign Guy was someone who I really thought WWE planted there because all of his signs were always pro face and against the heels. Turns out that wasn't the case at all. He was a major, major fan of WWE. Unfortunately, he had lost his wife to cancer and would go from show to show and loved the chase of being able to try to get front row tickets. That even when WWE offered him the tickets following his part on Deal or No Deal, he didn't accept them because he wanted to get them on his own. At least I don't think he did. But it was always fun to see him there. Be like, damn, Sign Guy's there. I think he still does go to shows, and I think he might even still wear a similar outfit. But if you ever get a chance to meet him, he's a great guy. Oh, there he goes. I thought no. I remember the finish of this match so well. I think it's coming up here any minute. Listen to the pop. Because now Orton is starting to get the RKO over. As, the finish that can occur almost out of nowhere. And actually, it's really funny. This is such an interesting time to be a fan of WWE. Because of also, they were just trying to find anything to stick. Cody Rhodes recently makes his debut here in 2007, and he's like super young, but he and Orton have a pretty good match on Raw. Hacksaw Jim Duggan has made his return. He's like an active wrestler at the time. Super Crazy is doing his thing. He's an active wrestler. Sandman's still there. Kind of a couple of holdovers from the ECW crew. The Highlanders are pretty big at the time. They're doing their thing. It's such an interesting time to kind of go back and see the cast of characters. Again, when Vince McMahon returns on the episode where they reveal that he has an illegitimate son, he brings out the entire roster for a Battle Royal, and just to see who's there is bizarre. It is a who's who of talent, a who's who of wrestlers, and pretty crazy. So yeah, Orton is establishing the punt. He misses the punt. Cena with the STF. Everyone thinks that's your ball game. Cena was putting people away with his STFU at the time. And I remember at this point, we're all on the edge of our seat. We're screaming for Orton because everything just felt like they were going to go with Orton here, and they were going to really push him to the moon, and it didn't happen. And there you go. And RKO. Look at the crowd. Crowd is jumping up and down. People are, this is it. This is your match. And crowd, everyone's standing. Everyone's ready to celebrate. Everyone is excited. 1, 2, kick out. And even Sign Guy is looking like, yes, it's a good match, but boy, even Sign Guy looked like he was ready. He's not happy. Even Sign Guy's disappointed that Cena kicked out there. And I'll never forget this moment here. Looks like, all right, Orton, Get him again. Get him again. What's going to happen? Cena's out of it. And he kicks him right up for an FU. Right into a 1-2-3. They happen to find a couple kids to like that finish, but they do pan over, and you do see a couple fans, throwing their hand in the air and hitting skids and getting out of there, and pretty disappointing finish considering where we were at in terms of getting behind Orton, and it looked like they were going to change the belt there. Didn't happen. Well, as this show wraps up here, everybody, I just wanted to thank you guys again for checking us out here on the Watchalong Wrestling Podcast. Make sure you give us a follow over at Watch Wrestle Pod. We're trying to grow the wrestling community over there. It's been a lot of fun. I love communicating with you guys, throwing up some polls, talking about different questions before some of the bigger wrestling shows, and it's been really cool. So that's been a lot of fun. And if you want to follow me personally, you can follow me at Tommy on the Spot. Try to do some live wrestling watch-alongs on there and kind of tweet with you guys about that. You also get some, quite a bit of frustration with the Washington Nationals, though I do think they dropped 20 runs on the Mets tonight, so I can't hate on them tonight. And that's a lot of fun as well. So, again, thank you guys again. Please do hit subscribe. It is definitely a help over on the podcast, and I do appreciate it. So, again, guys, thank you so much for checking us out today. I appreciate it. And John Cena won, and now it looks like, 11 years later, the big story is that him and Nikki Bella are no longer together, right? So, happier times for John back in 2007, though not so happy for some fans who were in attendance. Crazy time for WWE in summer of 2007. But fun to kind of relive some of the moments of a show that I didn't have such fond memories of, though a time period where I really did. So, that's going to do it for me, guys. But make sure you guys do chime in. Let me get you the date on that. It is going to be next Thursday, August the 9th, 9:30 p.m., right here on the Watchalong Wrestling Podcast, Summerslam 2013, one of my favorite shows. Make sure you hit subscribe and join me for that watch-along. It's going to be a lot of fun. Until next time, everybody, this has been your main man, Tommy on the Spot. And from the Watchalong Wrestling Podcast, we are saying so long and good night.